Hello and welcome to the SCP podcast. For those of you who are new to it, SCP is a Society for Consulting Psychology, and we are the Division 13 of the American Psychological Association, otherwise known as APA. Today we have Dr. Mark Sirkin, who's the Division 13 APA Council, and he's also a member of CodePAR and is past president of SCP. He's co-hosting with me, and we are here to interview Dr. Beth Rom-Rymer. She is a candidate for the APA president that Division 13 is backing, and you'll get to know her, so I'm not going to do a long intro. But first of all, welcome, Mark and Beth.
Thank you so much. So good to be here.
Thank you, Joanie.
Excellent. So, Mark, why don't you start off? Let's get started with some questions for Beth right away.
Sure. Okay, let's just jump in then. Beth, can you tell us about yourself, why you're running, and why you believe you're most qualified to be APA president?
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Joanie. So I believe that I can be the voice of the many diverse voices in APA, and I can create a productive path forward for all who want to grow our association and our discipline in all of its beautiful complexity. My life's journey as a grandchild of immigrants, my life's work as a trauma clinician, forensic expert, legislative advocate, university lecturer, author, state, national, and international leader, I think uniquely qualifies me to be APA president. From my Ukrainian grandmother and grandfather who escaped the murderous pogroms in Eastern Europe, my American-born mother and father, and my large extended family, I learned about the Jewish ideals of a loving commitment to family and to social justice in our larger society. Rabbi Hillel's maxim, if you're not for yourself, who are you? If you are for yourself only, what are you? And if not now, when? Were the foundations of who we were as Jews in 20th century America. So I went to Princeton. I was in the first women's class in 1973, and there we demonstrated the importance of the social activist's voice. I was the first woman to be president of a residential college at Princeton, where we advocated for student rights and the larger community's use of our abundant campus resources. I was also a summer intern for Congresswoman Bella Abzug, if you remember Bella, back in the 70s. I was part of the women's movement and the student movement that
hats,
demanded,
right?
I'm sorry, the hats,
yes.
Yes. That demanded social justice for all who are minoritized, marginalized, and targets of hatred and violence. Bella was a wonderful mentor. And then in 1977, I created the Victim Witness Assistance Unit in the State Attorney's Office in Tallahassee, Florida, to assist violent crime victims and witnesses in the criminal justice system. In 1978, I co-founded and became the first board president of Refuge House, a shelter for women and children as survivors of domestic violence. Today, I'm so proud to say 46 years later, both the Victim Witness Assistance Unit and Refuge House have significantly expanded their reach, annually serving scores of thousands of women, children, and men, all survivors of violent crime. Throughout my career as a clinical psychologist in Chicago and a nationally respected forensic psychologist, I've worked with domestic violence and sexual violence survivors and was a faculty lecturer for many years at the University of Chicago, the Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science, the Massachusetts School of Professional Psychology, and Northwestern University, teaching the courtroom role of the forensic psychologist. And then in the early 2000s, I became a national movement leader for prescriptive authority after having been elected Division 55 president in 2004. I was then twice president of the Illinois Psychological Association in the 2010s and have led the successful legislative movement for Illinois Psychologists' Prescriptive Authority ever since. Throughout the 2000s, I was broadly participating in APA governance and outside organizations, including the APA board, the APA council leadership team chair, president of 56, and founder of several organizations, including the Illinois Association of Prescribing Psychologists, the Association of Jewish Psychologists, and the International Prescriptive Authority Association. The Prescriptive Authority movement's mission is to provide care for our community's most vulnerable and underserved, from a cadre of licensed prescribing psychologists representative of BIPOC, AAPI, LGBTQIA+, Jewish, and disabled communities. My goal is to increase access to the highest quality mental health care in Illinois by 100%. I am completing a book entitled The Revolution in Healthcare, How Prescribing Psychologists Are Changing the Landscape of Mental Health Care in the United States. Psychologists, all of us, because of our extraordinary education, training, and experience, have an impact every day on the lives of individuals, families, and community systems. I wholeheartedly support the critical work done by applied, clinical, and academic psychologists, and I passionately believe in protecting clinical and neuropsychological practice while seeking to expand practice to include prescriptive authority, integrated behavioral health in a variety of healthcare settings, telehealth durability, community mental health, population health, and a plethora of collaborative intersectional relationships among research scientists and scientist practitioners working on ways to achieve health equity and dismantle all systemic inequities. I'm committed to listening and responding to the initiatives from our very diverse APA communities. I will continue to partner with you so that together we are using our APA bully pulpit to amplify our scientific research, to work with all media outlets, to speak to a broad representation of audiences and conferences, testify before congressional committees and all our institutional bodies for the maximum impact. We will powerfully speak on behalf of all psychologists.
Wow. I mean, if I didn't have some notes here, I wouldn't even know what to ask you next because that was so overwhelming with your life story, your experience, both in the world and leadership, as well as a psychologist, and your plans for the APA. Very impressive. I guess the one question that I would have, I mean, especially since this is the Division 13 SCP,
Yes.
Society of Consulting Psychology, I would say that, there's murmuring among some of the applied psychologists, especially consultants, that the APA is not supportive enough of consultants. And so the question that we're all wondering is how will you advocate for psychologists who are working with organizations?
Thank you. So in addition to the work that I've just talked about, I've also been very involved with applied psychology for most of my career. So when I was back as an undergraduate in psychology, I did an extensive literature review on conflict theory for my junior thesis, highlighting the work of social psychologists Sheriff and Sheriff. You may have read them, the Robbers Cave Experiment, from 1954. As part of my thesis work at Princeton, I studied with Dr. Carolyn Sheriff at Penn State, and the title of my senior thesis was Psychology in the Service of Society. For this thesis, I did a field observational study in the Princeton High School in which there was a high level of student intergroup conflict. Both of these projects presaged my career-long efforts to use applied psychological knowledge to address real-world problems. For my master's thesis, I worked with Chuck Hewlin at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. My research then was entitled The Role That Gender and Administrative Position Constellations Play in Organizational Behavior. As part of this research, I traveled throughout the state of Illinois in both rural and urban areas, interviewing and observing intra-group administrative relationships in 8 community mental health centers. Not only did I collect rich data, but I became more competent in understanding organizational consulting roles. And then for my PhD dissertation, under the supervision of the late Fred Camphor, I created an intervention paradigm to assess whether elderly residents of 4 nursing homes in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, when given opportunities for greater control in their lives, would experience higher levels of self-esteem and suffer from fewer mild and acute illnesses than the control group of elderly nursing home residents who had not received this intervention. And they did. And my experimental group did experience higher levels of self-esteem and did have fewer illnesses, which was terrific. So since earning my PhD in clinical psychology at Illinois, I've used my applied psychology training throughout my career. In addition to my work as a practicing clinician, I've had a national consulting forensic practice. I've been a legislative advocate, community organizer, and an organizational consultant. In my early education and training, my mentors have included prominent social and IO psychologists. I've worked extensively with police departments and consulted with several Fortune 500 companies on stress management and conflict resolution in the C-suite. I continue to be very much involved in legislative advocacy, creating public policy, and developing organizational structures that support divergent perspectives and progressive social movements. In recent years, I've founded and co-founded 2 organizations, the Illinois Association of Prescribing Psychologists the Association of Jewish Psychologists, and then, as I mentioned, the International Association of Prescriptive Authority. For all of these reasons, I can say that I not only support applied psychologists, I am an applied psychologist. I know firsthand that applied psychologists, particularly those practicing in less traditional roles and settings, can experience professional isolation. As APA president, I would work to ensure that we strengthen our recognition and support for these divergent, rich, and too often overlooked areas of psychology. I was pleased to note that an Office of Applied Psychology was created within the Science Directorate, and that a governance committee for the advancement of general applied psychology, COGAP, has been formed. However, I also know that APA too often has been siloed, not recognizing the important roles that applied psychology can play both in their own areas of specialization and in health and mental health areas of research and practice. And I will make sure that that recognition is there and grows.
Great.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, you answered my question about working in organizations as well as all of applied psychologists. Mark, did you have another question for Beth before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I guess the question is just maybe a little deeper dive on what you just talked about. How
Yeah.
will you advocate for psychologists working with organizations?
Yeah, thank you. So I know, we talked about applied psychology is too often overlooked. It's not unusual for dominant mental health groups in APA to be oblivious to the work of applied psychologists, much less to consider how these fields can help to advance their own areas. So in every venue, I will continue to highlight the importance of applied psychology in advancing psychology as a whole and in addressing the social problems of the day. I will reference my own diverse background and my profound appreciation for the fascinating and too often little known or recognized array of professional activities in which psychologists engage. I'm excited about the expansive and multidimensional nature of our field and how, using our science, we can advance psychological knowledge and the public's awareness of our contributions. I will advocate for a path to appropriate licensure for those applied psychologists wanting to be licensed, and ASPPB needs to be able to create these alternative paths. And I will advocate for a path to create policy that embraces applied psychology. There's a pressing need for national organizations, including APA, and governments to better understand the diversity of psychology and the important role that applied psychologists can play compared to others working in similar areas who lack that training. If requested, I will testify nationally, speak publicly around the world, write articles, speak to communities using all media outlets, assemble visible and diverse coalitions and task forces of multidisciplinary leaders to make sure that the applied psychology voices are heard. Within APA, I will work hard to ensure that professional practice structures, such as those creating or revising guidelines as relevant, always have applied psychologists represented in task forces or panels that too often do not include them. In fact, I will advocate that every task force, board, or committee established by APA be required to consider whether applied psychology seats are needed, helping to ensure broader representation across all areas of psychology. I will advocate for a greater awareness about the roles that well-trained applied psychologists play, so that APA can better integrate applied psychology with all of its other diverse disciplines within our vast field. As knowledge of applied psychologists' expertise, training, and competencies become more widespread, both within and outside of APA, my hope is that applied psychologists, many who have left APA, will return to APA and will impact our future directions. To fully ensure that I understand the priorities of applied psychology, given the strongly clinical practice presence at APA, I will engage in ongoing conversations with all of the applied psychology divisions, COGAP, the Office of Applied Psychology, the GAP Caucus, other applied psychology caucuses, and all interest groups of applied psychology to hear your concerns and your priorities. I give you my commitment that I will continue to be responsive to what I hear from you.
Excellent. Okay, I think that our voices will be heard as applied psychologists and consultants through you in that position. So there you have it. You've heard from Beth Rom-Rymer, candidate for APA president that the Division 13 is backing and supporting. But of course, we would say it's up to you, all members, choose your candidate and vote. It's always important to vote in any election, especially for our own APA election. And you should have received an email with a personalized link for you to vote. And you'll see that you'll click on that. You'll see the candidates and their statements. And please go ahead and do that. Any last words from anyone here before we wrap up?
It's been such a great pleasure to be here with the both of you. Mark, I've known you in the last couple of years. We've done some work together on many different areas, and we see each other at council. Joanie, it's such a pleasure to meet you. So I really look forward to working with consulting psychologists and all applied psychologists and the rest of our many diverse voices throughout APA. It's a great pleasure, I think, to continue learning what everybody has to give and everybody's expertise. And I just love to learn and to find out more about what other people are doing and to support that as much as I can.
Well, thank you. Thank you both. It's been great.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for doing this. And I look forward to seeing our audience watching this podcast. We'll see you soon. This has been the SCP podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.